November the 11th is a very important day every year. That is the time to pay honour and respect to those who lost their lives protecting our country, and to protect the freedoms and rights that many of us take for granted. It's also, I think, a time to remember those who we lost during the COVID-19 pandemic, and to show some support for our new heroes, who are the frontline workers, doctors, nurses, ambulance drivers, and those people who have put their lives at risk as well to protect other people. Remembrance Day has been celebrated in Britain since November the 11th, 1919. On the first year anniversary of the end of the First World War, the City of London fell silent at 11 AM on that day. Bustling cars, people going to work, and just the daily commutes of many Londoners were halted by a 2-minute silence, as many people across the country stood still and paid their respects to those who lost their lives. 2 minutes is a very small amount of time, but for many of our armed forces personnel and for the families of those who gave their lives, it's very significant, and a day of which they have a lot of gratitude. My family actually has a lot of connections to war, and it's more than I actually thought about. My great uncle was killed during the First World War. He was serving in the Navy. My great grandfather worked as a shipbuilder in Dundee. My paternal grandfather was an engineer in the Second World War, and my mum actually served as a volunteer nurse in Bosnia in 1993 during the conflict in the Balkans. So I have had a lot of military connections in my family, be it for small or large, and it's more than what I thought, like I say. But those people all did good things in the end. It takes a lot of bravery to fight in your own war, let alone someone else's war. And here in Canada, where I live, that certainly is what is the message. You know, many Canadians and as British people as well have fought to defend their respective homelands. And the reason I'm doing this video is to pay tribute to something West Ham related, the West Ham Pals, also known as the 13th Service Battalion of the Essex Regiment. The West Ham Pals were formed in late 1914. They were set up in November 1914, 3 months after the war was declared in Europe. Many of the members who signed up were first-generation West Ham United supporters. Bear in mind, the club was less than 20 years old at the time. And up to 1,000 men signed up to recruiting officers across the East End to serve the country. They even wanted to show their support for West Ham when they were on the battlefield, and asked to have the crossed hammers logo, which is here, stitched on their hats. Some of them wanted to go there to, quote, give the Germans a good smacking. They were eventually sent out to France in 1915 and fought in the Battle of the Somme, as well as Vimy Ridge. And I know Vimy Ridge because a lot of Canadians fought in the Battle of Vimy Ridge, and it's commemorated every single year here in Canada. The West Ham Pals fought alongside the Canadian Armed Forces in the First World War, and also the members of the British Commonwealth at the time. I think that, in a way, that shows unity between all the countries. Everyone was coming together to fight for a cause, and these West Ham Pals definitely did what they had to do in the war, leaving their families, leaving their loved ones to defend the UK from a foreign invader. They even kept their West Ham roots when they were fighting, and still follow the club quite closely. They actually used to shout up the irons when they were charging up from the trenches and onto the battlefield. Out of the 1,000 that went out to fight, over a quarter of them died, and around half of them received life-changing injuries. Even despite their efforts, they never got a full victory parade, which I think is absolutely wrong and uncalled for at the time. But thankfully, West Ham United Football Club honours these brave men every single year during the Remembrance Day silence and with a plaque which Sir Trevor Brooking opened at the old Boleyn Ground in 2009. The West Ham Pals was disbanded in 1918, and many of them struggled to get back to normality. And that's one of the side effects, I think, with a war. You're used to being told what to do, you're used to having some instruction from your commanding officers and your corporals and the hierarchy, and you see and hear some horrible things that stay with you for the rest of your life. Back in those days, I know some history class, it was known as shell shock. These days we now call it PTSD. And that's one other casualty of war, is PTSD. A lot of the West Ham Pals actually suffered from that after the war, no doubt. There are actually some books you can read as well about the West Ham Pals. There's the West Ham Battalion website on westhampals.blogspot. There's Up the Hammers by Barney Alston and Elliot Taylor, which is the West Ham Battalion in the Great War, a book about those individuals who gave their lives as well. And I'm actually tempted to give it a read because I'm into West Ham history and I want to know a little bit more about these men. Many of them would have been around my age. Who knows, some of you, the viewer, they could have been around your age. Even 16-year-old kids were going out to fight. 16-year-olds being put onto a battlefield with next to no military experience. Scary stuff. Many years later, in the Second World War, West Ham players decided to go and fight for Britain. Players such as Ted Fenton and Archie Macaulay. Other players went to different training camps to work as instructors. West Ham manager at the time was Charlie Painter, and he had to borrow players from other teams just to complete the football season, even though it was very loose at the time because of the war. Even then, a lot of Hammers players decided to go out and fight, which is something else if you ask me. These are like still young guys, players who even joined the Essex Regiment, players who went to the Aldershot Barracks. Ted Fenton went to the Aldershot Barracks. Archie Macaulay went to Scotland, his homeland, to work as a PT instructor. Charlie Walker served in the Royal Air Force during the Second World War. Players such as that. The Boleyn Ground was actually destroyed during a Blitz raid, and it wasn't fully restructured until 1946. A lot of things were lost in the stadium because of that attack. It would be some time before her stadium was repaired. But we still have to commemorate those players who put in some effort during the Second World War. Because the Second World War was terrible. My grandparents lived through that. My dad's father worked as an engineer during that time. My dad's family members as well lived through that. It was a scary time, and we look at how we are now. We're lucky that we didn't live back then. I mean, in a way, I could say that the COVID-19 pandemic is a little bit like the Second World War, and let me explain why, before you judge it. Everyone's had to make a sacrifice. British people had to make sacrifices in the Second World War to protect the country. We had to make sacrifices by staying at home and decreasing the spread of the virus to protect the country and to protect other people. These West Ham players and fans in two respective wars were very brave men. And the men and women as well who continue to serve Britain, and Hammers abroad who have served in wars such as in Afghanistan and Iraq, those are the people that we salute, as well as non-West Ham supporting soldiers. I absolutely respect anyone that serves the United Kingdom and serves in the armed forces, because it takes absolute courage to do that. It takes nothing but bravery, honour, and some patriotism to defend your country like that. They do things that other people can't do, or can't even dream of doing. For the West Ham pals, and to those players who did their part in the Second World War, we simply say thank you. Thank you for what you did. Your memories live on at West Ham United, and although you may not have got the recognition that you deserve, we honour you every single year. On the 11th hour of the 11th day, we will remember them.